one of the visuals that has become one that I use frequently, and as well as others are using it, is I call it a 4 options model now. And it came about trying to understand how to draw power, rights, and interests. In a book that I was reading, it said there are millions of ways we deal with conflicts, but all of them could be put into 3 categories: power, rights, and interests. Well, I tried to draw a picture of that, and so this is my picture, but it ended up in 4 instead of 3. And I worked with trying to make it 3 for more than a year, and then I finally just said, well, I'm going to go with 4. But so the I's in each of these cases is the one in a conflict of some sort. So it could be a victim and offender. Or so. The X's are outside persons. So like if a parent has a couple children and the children are arguing and the parent gets involved, the parent would be the X. And so they're involved with the conflict, but it's not their conflict. The conflict was the kids. And the circle in 1 and 2 and the oval in number 3 and 4 represents who has the ability to make the decision, or who has the power to make the decision. So in number 1, one side has the power to make the decision over another. In the second one, an outside authority makes the decision. So that also could be like a judge making a decision here. So the judge or a parent making a decision for their children. This would be where the parties make their own decision together, here with some outside help. And this is what I also call a mediator. That's where a mediator is there to help them make the decision. So there's a significant difference between this, what the X does here, and what the X does here. Here the X makes the decision for them. Here the X helps them make their own decision. And it's very important here, after a decision has been made, that they're asked, did you really agree? And especially when there's a big power differential, like a teacher and a student, or a parent and a child. If you ask both of them, did you really agree? Did you really agree? And if one of them says that I didn't really agree, but I felt like I had no choice, then what we really did, instead of doing one of these, we actually did one of these, where somebody else was really taking the power. So restorative justice, I think, is really focused on using this, number 3, as much as possible, assuming that people probably in many situations won't be able to work on their own. But if the decision cannot be made here, then the decision is made here. And the way these decisions, they always have to meet that criteria of being respectful, reasonable, intended to restore, and intended to reintegrate. So even if the decision is made here, it's not like we moved here, now we're going to punish. It means we move here, and now we try to find a good resolution that actually comes as close as possible to helping everyone recognize the injustice, restore equity, and clarify the future together. So that restorative justice prefers using this and this. This is generally only an immediate safety situation, or an arrest or something like that. But then it gets into these here. If it goes to the court first, it can be, in our case in the CJC, it goes here very briefly, but then it is referred down here. If the decision is made here, then the court acknowledges that decision as the final decision. So now in schools, we can use this same event. And if the teacher and the student, instead of the teacher being here and here, the teacher can say, I'd like to make a decision with you here. And if they agree, then they can work out an agreement here. If they need help, they could have somebody help them. Most students, when they're given the option, of these 4 options, they're smart. And they look at it and they say, if I do number 1, I'm probably not going to be the one in the circle. Or if we do a number 2, I'm not going to be in the circle. But in 3 and 4, I'm in the circle, which is exactly what we want. We want young people to learn to accept responsibility, but they're not the ones who make the final decision. They make that decision together with another person. So if it's with their teacher, for example, it doesn't mean the teacher and the student have the same positional power. It doesn't mean they have the same informational power, but it means for this situation, they're going to work toward trying to find something they both can really agree to. And when they both really agree, they've got an agreement, and when those agreements are made and kept, trust grows. So this is another sort of visual that describes something, a much bigger idea. And this continuum says commitment to be constructive, high and low, and this continuum says issues, high and low. And so in any conflict, there are always some issues, and there's always the question of whether or not we're willing to be constructive. And so what I found in my experience in mediating lots of different kind of cases is that if people are willing to be constructive and they're willing to address the issues, not just the issues that I think are important, but also the ones you think are important. If we're willing to be here, where we're willing to take on the issues and be constructive, we can work through almost anything, especially if we have some good strategies to help us sort of address the possibilities. If people are not willing to be constructive, then they're probably going to be destructive, and it's not going to. So I will only bring people together if they agree that this is what they want to do, and they want to be constructive. And it doesn't mean they have to give up on any issue. It doesn't mean they have to say it's okay what happened. It means that while we're together, we're going to be constructive and we're going to address the issues. And I think that once we have the understanding together that all the parties in the conflict know that the others want to be constructive as well as they want to be, and they're willing to address all these, then everyone relaxes a little bit, and now we can really address the hard issues, even if they're very difficult, when we've agreed to this. Not only to listen to them in the sense of, I've heard you, but willing to say, you said that, and then summarize what they said with a question until the speaker says, yes, that's what I said. Because being listened to is very closely associated with caring. It's only in a caring situation that we're willing to actually summarize in a way that lets the person know that I really understand your thoughts and your feelings. And I test that and if you correct me, I say thank you, because I want to get it the way you really intended it. So this is a visual to describe, I think, what we usually do in VORP, or any time there's a conflict where it's not just a problem to be solved, but it's a hurt, or it's a violation, or an injustice that's been experienced. So this outside circle here is really related back to the other diagram, and it's the idea of being constructive. And then once people come together, the things that need to be done are to recognize the injustice, and we don't want. My preference is to not leave that until everybody there says yes, the injustices are recognized. Once we get to that point, then we're ready to move on to what would it take to restore equity and to clarify the future. And so we generally do that by having people write down their ideas first. And then we put those up to look at them, and then we start to think about, so which of those ideas can we agree to and that we think will really resolve that for us. And then any agreements that come out of this, we feel like it's important to write those agreements. So we write down, the agreement starts with, we listen to each other and we agree that the injustices were recognized. That's the first agreement. The second agreement has to do then with, what did we decide we're going to do to repair things as much as possible? And what are we going to do for the future? How do we keep this from happening again? How do we have a better relationship together if they're in an ongoing relationship? So those are all written and then they're signed, which means that I'm saying, yes, I'm giving my word that I will do this. And that agreement includes when we're going to meet again to read this agreement and say, do we feel like we're all keeping that agreement? And we might have many follow-up meetings or maybe just one, depending on the situation. Now, when people have done all of this and they've kept those agreements and they mutually recognize that all those have been kept, then we have experienced, if you ask them, they'll say, oh yeah, I think we've forgiven each other. We've experienced forgiveness. And they might not have used the words forgiveness, or they might have. It depends. Some cases not. But then they reflect on it and say, oh, yeah, we've forgiven each other. So it's a discovery as opposed to a pronouncement. It's not something that I just say, I forgive you, and then I hope that we don't ever have to look at this and talk about it again or whatever. It's actually, we've taken care of the situation so that it really is it's not that we've forgotten it, but it has a new meaning for us now. It's now we think of it in a different way because we know that the injustice was recognized. We know that and we've agreed to what was done to restore equity, whether it's apology or whether it's payment or whether some combination of all those things. We know that's accepted, and we know that the plans for the future are different. And we know that because we've met, we know that people are keeping the agreements. And so it's just so when agreements are really made and kept, people who had no trust before now start to trust each other. And it's not a matter of one saying, I just should have more trust. It's not. It grows organically when we've actually done the hard work, and then we've kept those agreements. That all of our families and all of our institutions, including our criminal justice system, will someday say, was there really a time when we just punished people for violating the law and we really didn't look behind it to see what was happening and to work at repairing things? That'll be in the distant past at some point.